So the first thing I want to try, chicken broccoli Alfredo. This is going to be out of order, but this is on page 20 of the little cookbook it came with. Now I'm going to deviate a bit from this in that I'm going to use some mushrooms as well. Yeah, so the rest is okay. I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. So noise level's not too bad. You can see the steam coming up. Looks like I'm using, now I'm having a spitball here a little bit. I'm pulling out of the battery through the inverter. It took about 4 minutes for the inverter finally warmed up too much to the point where it finally turned on its own fan to cool itself off. So I'm using the inverter, but I've got two different solar controllers. One solar controller controlling one solar controller controlling the 2 panels on the roof. Then I got one on the ground. So I have to run around and count up how many amps those two devices are putting into my DC system along with what I'm getting from the battery. So I have to do a round robin and count up all the amps I'm using everywhere. And it looks like I'm using about 110 amps. So that's a little over 1400 watts of power. So I'm about half the capacity of what my inverter could do. So I'm well within tolerance of everything everywhere. But the exact percentage I'm using is a little hard to figure out what is actually coming fully out of the battery, because at the same time I'm getting energy off the solar panels. So I would say the end result, if you want to use one of these little foodies, the little Speedy from Foodie Speedy, whatever, you're going to have to, your system needs to be able to tolerate coming out of the battery bank at least spitball it, call it 120 amps at the low end before you start tripping things off, right? So throw a little cushion in there. You probably need to be able to pull out of your battery bank 150 amps for, I think it's going to be in about 20 minutes, because it took about 4 or 5 minutes, I think, before the, well, actually it took a little more than 5 minutes before the fryer started really going, when you can hear the fan going. So yeah, it's probably about 20 minutes at 110-ish amps. If your system can do it, you can do one of these little Ninja Speedies. So going from the textbook answer, this says it takes 1,760 watts. So basically an 1,800 watt system. And mine's a 3,000 watts, so I'm well within tolerance. So that's your Ninja Speedi Foodie power requirements. Okay, so this is what the finished product looks like. Let's go ahead and move this around, see what we got. Chicken looks pretty good. Oh yeah. Chicken's cooked all the way through. The pasta feels good. You know what I mean? This doesn't feel crunchy except for the parts that weren't inside the liquid. Kind of got toasted. Got a little cheese add on to it. Okay, for the taste test, let's try a mushroom here. Mushrooms are great. A little broccoli. Hot. Yeah, maybe a little less cooking on the broccoli. Maybe it's something you do. Once you start cooking, toss it in. Kind of personal preference, I guess. The chicken was a little dry. Maybe if I just hadn't cut it quite so thin strips. The noodles, grab a couple of these. The parts of the noodle that were sticking out that got dried out, those are crunchy. But yeah, that's a winner. Of course I had cheese. So it looks like from the math, I think I used maybe about 30 amp hours out of my 400 amp hour battery bank. Maybe a little more. But at the same time though, I was charging back up with solar panels. So that's probably less than 50 amp hours out of the battery. Which means if you had just a typical 100 amp hour lead acid battery, you already depleted half of it. You just blew you through your battery. So you're not supposed to go below 50% on those. But I got 400 amp hours of lithium. So I use about 10% little less than 10% probably of my entire battery bank had I had no solar. So yeah, this works out pretty good. We'll watch some TV.